Hi everybody, it's really lovely to be here, really a privilege to be here to talk to you about my organisation. So just tell you a little bit about what we do and also talk about Pharmac and our involvement with Pharmac and the Carers Alliance, who are looking at basically improvements for the Carers strategy, which is coming up. So I only have 15 minutes and I have quite a lot to talk about, but I will do my best. So just to explain my funny accent before I start. So, can you guess? Yeah, my X's are not very good. The map wasn't perfect. But yeah, I think I better tell you, because you probably can't guess. But it's Newcastle in England, so I'm actually a Geordie. But I lived in Ireland for 4 years, so I have some slants to my accent which are Irish, because if you're English in Ireland, you better speak with a different accent. And I lived in Gibraltar, which is a very unusual sing-songy accent, which actually made my accent even worse. And I lived in Singapore, and then I came here. So I've been here 12 years, and I still don't have a Kiwi accent. I'm very sorry. But hopefully you can understand me. So who are we? It's not meant to have question marks on there, actually, but that's okay. We've been around since the year 2001. And it's an umbrella organisation for all rare disorder groups. So because there's 7,000 to 8,000 rare disorders, that's a lot of groups. So we have about 118 different support groups that we have within our group content, and we link people in. So as inquiries come in to myself, I'll try and find a group. Unfortunately, 118 when there's 7,000 to 8,000 disorders isn't always going to hit the mark. So obviously it becomes an international link, but the point is to not feel isolated and alone and to hopefully develop more links as we go through with time. The definition that we follow is the European definition. So there is a lot of confusion about a definition of a rare disorder. 1 in 2,000 is the definition we take, but for Pharmac and for the Australian medicines kind of analysis, it's 1 in 50,000. So you're going from 1 in 2,000 to 1 in 50,000. So, yeah. Who are we? Dr. Colette Bromhead is this chief executive, and she is also a sexual health expert at Massey University, because it's all part-time work. We're all part-time. So it's only 2.19 FTE. So we all have other jobs that we do as well as this, but we're very passionate. We're very involved, and when we go to work, we hit the ground running, and we fit a lot in. So she is actually known as the Queen of Chlamydia, and she's very proud of that, and High Priestess of Gonorrhea. So she's just back from Newmare, where she has been part of a sexual health conference, which she didn't like at all, because they did not look after her well. So yeah, but she's extremely good at what she does, and she's a very good voice for our organisation. Amy Watson is our communications and fundraising manager. It's just next to Colette. We have Ben Sherman, who is working with all the web-based information that we have, and Anne Merritt is the administration manager. And we definitely need administration. So what do we do? One of our main goals is awareness, so raising awareness of rare disorders. It's an invisible disorder. Occasionally for people, they don't get the help and the links that they may get if it was a common disease. So we try to change that. What we push for is that rare is everywhere. When there's 7,000 to 8,000, that adds up to a lot of people. That adds up to actually more than have diabetes in this country. So it's really, as a collective and unified voice, it's very strong. And unfortunately, people are spread far and wide. Very tricky, like herding cats, to get people together. But that's what we're aiming to do. So we have a Rare Disease Day in February, and this was our last poster child. She is called Gabrielle, and she has Sclerosis congenita, which is 1 in a million. There were 4 people in New Zealand who had it, and she's the only survivor, unfortunately. It does have to be an international support group for her, and they are very active. She's just been to a conference in America on this particular disorder, and it's a genetic disorder affecting the telomeres of her genes. So her cells are actually aged much, much faster than anyone else. So she's like an 80-year-old in a cellular sense. And it leads to bone marrow transplants and lots of nasty things, unfortunately. Rare is everywhere, even Einstein. So uncombable hair syndrome is a rare disorder. My friend sent me this, so yes. So this is my American friend who is also Jewish, so yes, he's explaining his own hairstyle. So they actually have said 1 in 17 people would suffer from a rare disorder, and in some places actually 1 in 10. So obviously it depends on the genetics in that particular group. There are higher incidence of certain rare disorders in different ethnic groups. So Ashkenazi Jewish have much higher levels, unfortunately, and they have much better screening because of that. So that's another thing to think about, is the screening level that we get in this country is not always the best. Another area is diagnosis. So obviously if there's 7,000, 8,000 disorders, the poor doctor's got to work it out. Often what we find is they have never come across it, never heard of it, haven't got a clue. And you might get this scenario. So hopefully you can read it. It's the moment when you realize you're the smartest person in the room and you're in the doctor's office. So it's pretty much, we've never heard of it, we don't know what's going on, go away and go and Google it. And I've actually had people being told that with SMA, which was very sad. Another thing that we do, and it's mostly me, is go to conferences like this one, and bigger ones too. So basically talk to GPs, talk to specialists, let them know rare disorders matter, they're important, and they need to think outside the box, and they need to be kind to patients and listen. So pretty big feat, really. Recently been to Queenstown Research Week. So this was a rare brain disease week, and talking to a lot of researchers about talking to each other and to also explain to them why they're doing their research and why it matters. So linking them back to the people they're doing it for and helping them to understand the importance and the value of the research that they're involved in, which actually was really inspiring for them. So that was awesome that we got that opportunity. We are holding a special interest group for the researchers. So different researchers in New Zealand, we're asking to bring them together and they can talk to each other, which they don't like to do very often. They're quite an introverted lot. And I was in research at one point, so I know. And I'm not introverted, but. So getting them together, they can talk to each other. Sometimes they're doing very similar work. Sometimes they could share resources. Sometimes they could say, oh, I've heard of this, that might help. There might be some funding. So getting them in a room together, this is the first one, and we're going to do it twice a year. So Dr. Colette Bromhead will be going down to Dunedin and help with this in November. So what else do? We do advocacy. So lots of advocacy with ministers. So spend a lot of time in Parliament, actually. This was our briefing to the minister when he first came in. And we just, again, explain what a rare disorder is. And it's quite remarkable how many times I've explained that to the same people and they still don't seem to get it. Shane Retty is one of them. I think I told him 4 times. So just explaining what I've already said, really, that there's 377,000 actually people with rare disorder in New Zealand when it's extrapolated, and 50% are children and 30% are not going to make it to their 5th birthday with those serious rare disorders. Oops. There. What are the challenges? And I don't really need to tell you what the challenges are, but the way that we see it is misdiagnosis. So often there's 2 to 3 misdiagnoses before you get to find out what it is that's going on. There is no national policy in New Zealand. If we have no national policy, then we have no weight and power to implement change. So we really need to look at that. There is a lack of research, basically around the funding of the research and the commitment of the pharmaceuticals, thinking about the profit that they may get from it, and also the difficulty of working to get the medicine through pharmac, to get it through to the patient. There's a lack of information for GPs. So GPs obviously have a lot to learn, and adding to that burden, if there's some way to help facilitate their learning around rare disorders, that would be something that we would be interested in doing. and a limited access to treatment. So whether or not the treatment is not available yet, or it's available but we can't get access to it because of the cost. And there's no national patient registry. So I find this particularly disappointing when I have someone who said, look, this is what I've got. Is there anyone else? Can you find somebody? And where do I start? So it's only luck. And I actually did find 3 people with the same disorder, and it was almost just a miracle that they all phoned. You know, such a small organization, but it's called Moya Moya. And they are now talking to each other. So for them, that's so valuable to not feel alone and isolated. Other countries, so Rare Voices Australia, they're ahead of us. They have got a national strategy and, well, it's a national framework they're calling it, and they have 6 strategic goals within that framework. So we did meet with Maggie Barry last week, and she is interested in hopefully helping us, because trying to do everything in the time we have is challenging. But hopefully we can get some help to actually start doing some policy writing and actually get a framework put in place so that we can use it to leverage and get some attention from the MPs to get some real change through. So we will be talking about that in the future, so it'll be on our website. And something that Rare Voices Australia actually have quoted, which is Helen Clark, is this quote: "No country can claim to have achieved universal healthcare if it has not adequately and equitably met the needs of those with rare diseases." So they are actually taking that on board when we're occasionally not doing so, which is. So what are our own challenges in New Zealand? Before the election, David Clark had mentioned and potentially promised a $20 million fund for over 4 years for rare disorders medicines. So basically money put aside that we could use to then pay for medicines that we may need in the future, innovative medicines that are quite expensive, extremely expensive sometimes. Unfortunately, once the election was completed, that was off the table. There was a Radio New Zealand interview with a very animated chief executive of mine, so you can listen to that. Yeah, and she was very upset about what was happening. So that has never been discussed since then, and we're still in negotiation around that. But I'll talk about it in a second. And also we were told, unfortunately, that we were losing our funding for our organisation by 50% by 2021. So we're already pretty much on the edge of managing. So it's quite a challenge. So that in itself is a bit of a difficulty, because obviously those higher level discussions for a collective voice won't actually occur if we're not there. So on the plus side, Minister Clark has put a letter of expectation to Pharmac, and he did state in that letter that he has an expectation that they will be doing more work with rare disorder medicines, and he wanted them to run another pilot, because they did run a pilot. The idea behind the pilot was to look at applications from pharmaceutical companies and then assess them and take on through that fund, through the 20 million. So without the 20 million involved, they haven't talked about the money side of it, but they have run another call for pharmaceutical companies to put forward their request. So at the moment, it's just bringing in the submissions and the applications from the pharmaceutical companies for rare disease medicines. That's where it's at right now. And the report on that is expected in November, so it's really close. And we all need medication, so even this little bush baby. So not getting access would be a problem. So are we going to get equity for rare disease medicines? Will they have a balance of considerations when they're looking at those proposals? This is still a question. Sorry. Other countries, such as Scotland, as an example, they do already have a balance of factors. So they don't just look at cost effectiveness, because if you're looking at cost effectiveness and you're only giving the medicine to a very small group, then basically it stops there. So they're looking at a patient and clinical engagement process. So they have patients, they have clinicians, they talk about all of the different factors in a balanced way. The criteria that they look at are unmet need for that population group and severity of the condition, so what's going on, what the impact would be for the quality of life, if they've got fatigue and pain and mental health challenges from it, the convenience of the treatment, and they actually stated dignity as well around the treatment, and the value and the impact on the family and the carers around the person with the rare disease. So they're actually looking at it in a holistic view, and this is something we definitely want to happen in New Zealand. Oops. So Pharmac has agreed to organise a new rare disorder subcommittee, and it gets pretty complicated to explain, but it's part of their group called PTAC. So they've got a subcommittee that's just been developed, which is only for rare diseases, but we don't have a consumer advocate on that group. They're pharmacists and clinicians, and we did expect one of the metabolic clinicians to be on that group, and he's not on that group. So at the moment we're going to write to all of the people in the rare disease subcommittee and just explain, who we are, and also hopefully get some dialogue. So we would really like to have a patient advocate on that group. The other thing was the call for applications. So they've gone out to the pharma companies and said, send us your applications and we'll look at them. So the application process is finished. It finished on the 3rd of September. They're going to be doing the review of the applications in November, and then they've got to report that to the minister. So that's the way it is. And on top of that, we've also put forward a proposal for how we would feel it could best be done. So how we feel that if it was separate from Pharmac, with a nice balanced view of considerations, that actually the process would flow more smoothly. And John Foreman, who is with lysosomal disorders New Zealand, he used to be the chief executive of NZORD in the past. He's been involved in talking to the ministry along with my chief executive, and those negotiations are happening right now. So basically it's quite pivotal what's going to happen next, and by the end of November, I think November is going to be a very, very busy month for the Minister of Health, because he's got mental health review finished as well in November. So he's going to be reviewing everything. So I don't really know what the answer is going to be for that, but my fingers are crossed, and my toes. So just to talk about carers, obviously as carers, it's a vital role and underestimated, and really the support for carers needs attention, and also it would be really good to get the next carers strategy, which is a 5-year plan, which is coming up next year, to be as flexible and as equitable and as transparent as possible. And if we don't advocate for that now and it comes in, it's too late. So the Carers Alliance are a group of, I think there's actually 50 not-for-profit organisations involved, and I'm one of them. I'm in the red. So it's basically just going to Parliament and talking about what carers want and how it's not working in some places around funding and how they would like it to work, and having those discussions. So that I'll show you the next slide. So there's 4 key priority areas that the Carers Alliance have focused on. And the first was funded family care policy. And actually it's been in the media just this week. So there was a meeting with Carmel Sepuloni, James Shaw, and who else? David Clark. And the agreement has been to do a review of it. So the issue was not to leave it as it is because it's not working so well. They've agreed they'll review it and see if they can improve it, which is a win. Respite care policy, there's actually a call for people to talk about what is working and what isn't working around respite. And again, then that will be taken to government and pushed through around, hey, actually, let's do this instead of doing it this way. So some issues around that are flexibility and the challenge of filling in the forms and the process. Flexible funding, so individualised funding. there is an issue around actually, does it give people genuine choice? And with the smaller amounts, could they not give it to people just as a budget to say, do with what you need to do with it, rather than dictate what people need to do with that money? And continence issues. So there's an issue around the continence products being handed out without a nurse specialist looking at the person. So they actually feel there's a lot of waste because the wrong products potentially are being given. And there's an issue with landfill and waste products, building up, and money and cost. So really it's a call for a survey, and the survey has just gone out. So hopefully you may have received that already, but it's just gone out last week. And that's just asking people if they have any connection to continence issues, what they think and what they want and how it's working. So again, it's getting the voice, the collective voice, really pulling that through and being there as an advocate. The email, if anybody wants to send any information to the Carers Alliance, this is the email to do it. And obviously I'll still be here at afternoon tea, so I'm happy to talk to people about that. And really for me, it comes back to linking everyone together. So with isolation, there's a lack of power, and with unification, there's strength. And that's really the only way forward for all of us. To present ourselves as a unified voice, then we actually can get heard. Otherwise, we'll be dismissed, and they'll just move on to something else. We have a stories project, and it brings us back to our wonderful patient group, lovely Heath, who has SMA. He actually, spinal muscular atrophy, and he has gained compassionate access to a drug called Spinraza, which is one of the most expensive drugs on the market, if not the most expensive drug on the market. Unfortunately, we would have expected him to have received the drug because the access was given to him several months ago, but there's some hold up at Starship Hospital. So he is due to receive it, but as such, I don't think he's got it quite yet. And we have other stories like this. This Gabrielle, who you saw on the poster. So you're welcome to go on the website and have a look, and obviously it would be great to get other people's stories as well. We do have a group called SWAN, which is Syndromes Without a Name. So this is when there's no diagnosis, and there's not going to be a chance for a diagnosis, really. So that issue around isolation is particularly difficult, and also difficult for funding, especially with education. They find it really challenging to get educational support when there's no diagnosis. So they do have a wonderful person who's actually going to coordinate this group. So this group is running and going strong, and her second name is Swan, by chance. Who'd have guessed? Fantastic. So we'd love to hear your stories. We'd love to get more interaction, more connection, because that actually helps us to do our job. And my passion really is to do the best I possibly can and advocate in the most powerful way that I can, and get people to listen, who can make the changes. I just thought this quote from Emily Dickinson was really lovely, and it's about hope. So hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. So thank you very much for your time.